Hi everyone, welcome to the VFX Notes Podcast. I'm Ian Fales, and as always, but this time in person, I'm joined by Hugo Guerra. Hi Hugo, how you going?
Hi. How you doing, Ian?
Great to be here.
Ian is here. We can prove it. He's
in
here.
the bunker.
Yes.
I love it in here. I've just literally sent out about 14 Instagram photos and videos from the bunker.
I know, it's a bit silly. We have a way too many cameras today. I'll send a picture of that.
This podcast is brought to you by Backlight. Backlight Creative enhances the entire creative project lifecycle. For pre-production, there's Celtics. For scriptwriting, beat boards, shot lists, and planning. And Backlight Gem, a narrative design platform for games and VR. For post-production, we've got F-Track Studio to manage creative projects with custom pipelines and reviews with CineSync and F-Track Review for high-res, real-time media collaboration. To manage your assets, connect your own storage to Iconic, a scalable cloud-based media asset management platform. You can learn more at backlight.co. And now on to the show.
How are you doing? It's
I'm
great
great.
to see you here in person.
Love being here, and I'm so happy I'm talking about one of the best films of the past couple of years with Cats. Oh my god, can't wait to talk about it. But before we jump into it, Hugo, I know you love the film too. We're going to do our usual shout out to our sponsors, our Patreon supporters, and basically everyone who watches us on YouTube. Without their support, we couldn't do the VFX Notes podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for all the support that we get every month. You know, there's so many of you supporting on Patreon, also some people supporting on members on YouTube. We can't thank you enough. The show couldn't really run without you. And of course, our sponsors that have been supporting us almost from the beginning. Thank you so much.
We really appreciate it. Hugo, Cats. We're jumping straight into this. It's a film that came out at Christmas time, 2019. Tom Hooper, a bunch of great actors / singers.
Yep.
Obviously based on the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, itself based on T.S. Eliot's poems.
Yeah.
Hugo, I'm not joking when I say I really enjoyed this film. I totally get why this film was a disaster. All the reasons which we'll go through about why this film did not work, both from a story point of view and also visual effects wise. But let's talk about the film and your reaction to it first.
Yeah.
Tell me about that reaction. You've only watched it recently, right?
Yeah, I did. I saw the trailers at the time. I couldn't bear to go and see this on the cinema. I was just too shocked by the trailer, and it was just nightmare fuel when I saw the trailer. And I just didn't, I don't, you know me, I don't like musicals. So I didn't really care much. I never seen the musical. I don't really care about musicals. I don't really watch musicals. So it wasn't really for me, this kind of film. But I recently saw it just for this podcast. And I have to say, it was a struggle, man. It was a struggle. I don't think I've ever experienced this in my life. I could not watch the film. The film is just horrendous. And it's horrendous. It's exhausting. It has terrible pace, terrible editing. It has no narrative. The art direction is just absolutely atrocious. I just could not watch the film. It took me 3 days to watch the entire film. I watched little pieces of it. I watched half an hour the first day, and then I stopped. I couldn't do it. And then I watched another half an hour the second day, and then I finally finished it on the third day. And then I watched the second time with the audio commentary, but not watching it. I was just listening to it.
Oh, okay.
I had it on the background and then listened to the audio commentary.
Yeah.
And this film was a really bad experience for me. I thought the film is just absolutely horrendous. It is by far the worst film we've ever done on the podcast. And it's by far probably the worst film I've ever watched. I'm sorry. It is horrendous.
Look,
how could you like this?
well,
We're going to stop the podcast now. We're not going to do the VFX Notes is canceled now.
well, this is the challenge with this film, but also other films based on pre-existing content or musicals in particular, where people have a love for the musical and then they try and make a film version of it and it works or doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
Now, Tom Hooper had made Les Mis.
Yeah.
And
which I also don't like as well.
Well, it was well received, but it didn't necessarily blow the world on fire. You know,
it was, man, it made $500 million. It was like,
but
for a musical, it was well received.
Yes, and I'm not even comparing this to Les Mis. That was a very true to the stage
got an
play.
Oscar and everything.
Yeah. With Cats, it's true that the actual musical which I've seen in Sydney, it's silly.
Yeah.
And whimsical and immersive, right? The cats actually come out into the audience at some point, at least in my production.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so you feel part of it, and you know, it's just a weird experience, but silly on deliberately. Very hard to replicate that on a film.
Yeah.
You know, because it's not as immersive.
Yeah.
I know the music very well. Even the songs are kind of silly, and some fit the musical and some actually don't. I actually think Memory is almost a strange opera song that doesn't belong in the musical. But, you know, people know the music. So I actually think with Cats, the movie, if you like the musical, you tended to want to see the movie. Whether you liked it or not was a different story. But you at least were familiar with the material.
Yeah,
that's what you weren't.
I think that makes a huge difference, because for me, like I had no clue what was going on. I was like, what the hell is happening? I did not understood a thing about the film, and I think you're right. Like, and you can see that from the ratings. The film, yes, it has 19 from Rotten Tomatoes, which is really low from the critics, but like the audience is like 55 or 56. Because I know
still terrible.
Yeah, but it's half. You know, it's half,
Yeah.
and I think that really shows that probably a lot of people love the musical. The musical's been around since the 80s, and it's like really beloved, and it looks quite interesting, the musical, actually, because I like the suits, and I think it's a bit camp. You know, it is a bit camp.
Yeah.
But it's the 80s, 90s camp. I understand that, and I don't know. Like I wish maybe they could have done it with those suits. Maybe I kind of felt the film. I couldn't get past the uncanny valley and just the sheer art design of the film. But I don't think it was the only problem I had with the film. I just think the film doesn't really have any narrative, and I understand that it's a musical.
Well, it's true. If
yeah.
you asked me what the plot of Cats was, I actually probably wouldn't be able to tell you.
Yeah.
You know,
well, cats want to go to heaven. I guess that's what they're trying to go to heaven.
Yeah,
and that's really it. Like, but I don't know. Like, I just feel there's something really off on this film, and it just on all levels. The tempo is a bit off, and the editing is all over the place. Sometimes it's nice editing, sometimes it's bad editing, sometimes it's too quick. It cuts too much, and I just feel the film. I don't know what happened, and then just the look of it, just like really, I don't know, man. I'm not gonna complain anymore, but I just feel like the film was just really misguided, and I feel like it has terrible shot design and terrible design and art direction in general. We're gonna talk a lot about that, but what was your experience? Because I really want to hear this. You know, you said you watched the musical, but like you went to the cinema to see it.
Went to the cinema with a full screening. It was a press screening. I think this is right before Christmas 2019. And my one big memory from watching this film is I'm sitting next to the girlfriend of a friend of mine, and the film ends, and I go, Trudy, what did you think? And she goes, that is the worst film I have ever seen. And I wanted to stay and watch the credits, of course, because I want to see the visual effects artist, and she could not get out of there quickly enough. And I'm like, oh, I've misread. Like, nobody liked it in my group, you know, like, but I kind of got it for the psychedelic stupidness, silliness of it, which is really what I think Tom Hooper had pitched to Universal and pitched to the actors, that it would be silly, funny, not cutesy necessarily, and that the music and the dancing would sort of bring it home.
Yeah.
And, you can argue one problem with this film is a bit, you're not really immersed in it, as I keep saying, from the musical. And part of it is, I think it's not terribly well edited, right? There's the dance scenes don't blow you away. Now, in some musicals to films, actually some of the dance scenes are even better in the film than the musical. I don't know why that is. They're just better staged, better choreographed, better. You're up close with the actors. It didn't quite work in Cats, but I still took away the whimsy, the fun, the silliness of it. Now, did I think it looked weird sometimes with the human faces, cats and digital cats and scale-sized sets and sometimes interesting lighting choices? No, I don't think that worked at all. And we'll definitely get into that, Hugo. Yeah. So my experience of it right before Christmas, when in Australia it's really hot and everyone's running around doing crazy stuff before Christmas, I loved it. I was like out of my brain watching it, and clearly other people around me hated it. So as I always do on this podcast, I try and remember the film experience. Yeah. And that was mine.
Yeah. I wish I'll be honest, I wish I went to see it on the cinema. I really wish, because I kind of missed that. I don't know why I didn't go and see it. I really don't know why.
Because of the horror.
Well, the film went through the rounds a lot. Like that trailer that came out, I think the trailer came out in July or June or something.
Right.
And the internet exploded with that trailer. And in fact, like a lot of the shots on that trailer are not even like the shots on the film. There's been a lot of changes since the trailer came out, and people were just horrified. And I kind of feel that the problem here is that the technology is there and this could have worked, but I'm not entirely sure that it had to be done with this look. I feel like the connection between having human bodies and leaving parts of the humans and leaving parts of the cats and then matching, that really didn't work for me. That design choice was really misguided. Because when you look at, I must say the Blu-ray is extensive with behind the scenes, which I was really surprised for a film that pretty much everyone hated. This has breakdowns, it has behind the scenes, it has even concept art, and really recommend people watching the Blu-ray, because the Blu-ray is a really great documentation of how this film was made. Yeah. Although it's very positive, and I think that has to do with, I really think that they thought they had a hit, and I think they thought everyone was gonna love it, because you feel that on the documentary. Yeah. But I was gonna mention the concept art that you see on the Blu-ray is really beautiful. Right. And so the drawings are really whimsical, and they're really like pastel colors, and they're very loose. And I look at those drawings and I'm thinking, wow, man, this would have been an amazing animation. Why didn't they just do an animation? Either a full CG one or a hand-drawn animation.
I'm not 100% sure of this, but I think that it was imagined as an animated film at some point. After the musical. Yeah. But you talk about the decision about retaining human characteristics and doing it as CG cats. I bet there were some interesting discussions early on amongst Universal, Tom Hooper and all of that, about, do we just put humans in creature suits like they do in the musical? Yeah. Do we do it like they did? Or do we do it as completely CG? Yeah. And the truth is, we'll get to this as well, I bet they wish they'd done it entirely CG, but still based on actor performances, right? Yeah. The challenge with doing it as practical suits and creatures is that for a musical, you do the makeup and they play it for 3 hours. With a film, you're filming it for 60 days. Yeah. And consistency of makeup for how many characters there are, would have been a tricky thing, right? It would have probably been inconsistent. It would have been 5 hours a day of application for 100 characters. I don't think practically they could have done it like that. Yeah. So this decision seems to be almost like, well, what's easier to shoot? But also, Hugo, they clearly were worried about, well, we've hired Ian McKellen, Judi Dench, Taylor Swift, all these other actors. We want to see them.
We want to see the faces.
We want to see the faces.
We want to see the faces. And it's funny that you say, as researching this podcast for the podcast, I do think there was supposed to be an animation. This goes back all the way to the 90s, where at some point Steven Spielberg was involved on this.
Oh yeah,
and
yes.
It was supposed to be an animation, and this was part of his initiative with DreamWorks, which was called Dream Animation or something. It was something. It had another name. They only did 3 films, and then it got shut down, and then it became DreamWorks. So this kind of jumped from Steven Spielberg to his Dream Animation thing, and then it went to DreamWorks. And then there was a time that Pixar was considering it, and that got dropped as well. And then kind of like it went into hibernation. Universal bought it, and it went to hibernation for a long time. And only after Les Mis came out and made $500 million, then that's when Universal thought that maybe it's a good idea. And that's when, Tom Hooper did 1 year of prepping and testing. They did makeup tests. They tried it with makeup. Like you said, it wasn't really going to work because it was going to be too tricky. And also, it was Tom Hooper was very concerned that the ears wouldn't move and things wouldn't move, which is a bit misguided because it works fine on the show. Like I felt like some of his problems were a bit weird, but I think the breakout point was when that test was made at the mill, and that's kind of how. Especially because of the Chemical Brothers music video.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
I only learned about this sort of after watching the DVD featurettes, because one of the things that happened with this film, Hugo, is that it became toxic for Universal. Yeah. They didn't end up promoting it much after pushback from those trailers, and then obviously people didn't see the film. There was literally no visual effects stories allowed for this.
Yeah.
But later on, I saw the test footage that the mill did. And of course, the visual effects for this film ended up being done by a bunch of Technicolor companies. And that was the mill.
Yeah.
And really, they'd only just been set up, in different places around the world, including Adelaide in Australia. Then Mr. X, and then MPC.
Yeah.
But what had happened was the mill had done this incredible Chemical Brothers video where a dancer performs in like a warehouse, and they'd really done, hadn't they, Hugo, some amazing body tracking to give her like these lattice legs in like CG lattice legs, and she's an amazing dancer. The music video is super cool. So I think I really think that the filmmakers saw what the mill had done and thought, well, we're going to have to be body tracking so many characters. Let's do a test. And I believe it was the same dancer.
Yeah,
right?
It's the same dancer. Yeah, the same technology as well, which is a mix of... At the time, the mill was using this suit.
MVN, Moven suit.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, a lot of people think it was automatic. It wasn't. Like, a lot of people still think to this day the Chemical Brothers video was just the suit and then they just put the CG on top. It's not really like that. The mill did extensive hand animation as well. So the suit tracked a beginning. It was like the beginning of the animation. Then they had to really hand animate a lot, which is common on mocap as well. Like a lot of times we end up having to do it all by hand. But the particular thing about the Chemical Brothers is the Chemical Brothers, I think it worked, first of all, because it's very bright, the shot. It's only almost one single shot. She's wearing her skin, and then she takes it out, and there's this kind of graphical skeleton mesh lattice thing, which I think you already know it's not real. So it never attaches to her face. It's inside her. The test, I think the test is actually much more successful than some shots on the film. And I feel that the test was probably more successful because I know, what it is. It was handcrafted just for that shot.
Well, and two things on that. One is there's only one cat character in that test. And also the test possibly, it was been fixed up for the DVD release, I don't know, a featurette, but it actually shows a transition from dancer to cat. And if you're watching that as a film executive or Tom Hooper, I think there's a magical quality to that probably was kind of convincing, but it's perfect, right? Like we can see how the dancing, like real life shooting of dancing, can be translated to a CG character. And whether or not that's the test that let them greenlight the film, we don't know. I don't know. I just assume everyone got excited about that test.
And I think that's what happened. Like they got really excited, and also let's be honest. Like Avatar has done this. Like we've seen things like this before. We've seen like full CG people moving around and doing things by using the mocap. Of course, this is different because they had sets, although they were mocapping everyone on the set, just like on Avatar. So they weren't on a volume. They were on real sets, scaled up to 2 or 3 size. But I think Universal and the director probably thought they would be fine. It's really exquisite work. The VFX work looks great. And the VFX looks outstanding. There's a few hit and misses, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. We know that some shots were rushed. We know that they had no time whatsoever, and so some shots look incomplete. And in fact, I've seen black edges in some shots. I've seen bad key in some shots. I've seen bad roto on some shots. I've even seen bad CG and bad track in some shots on some. And yes, that is true. But I don't think that's the problem. I think the audience reaction was not because it's a bad CG. It's just that it's just ugly. I think that's the problem. It's because it's not beautiful. It's really, really ugly. And this merge between the faces and the rest of the fur, it just doesn't work. It's just not aesthetically pleasing image. And it really becomes a bit horrifying in some shots. And I think that's what people react to it. You know? It's well done.
Yes, the artistry, again, by the Mill Film, as it was called, sort of a brief resurgence of Mill Film that then went away again. And Mr. X and NPC and possibly some others, is, they put their heart and soul into it. I've got a few stats here, actually. There were 76 CG hero characters, which meant 18,000 performances needed precise match moving. And in the end, they needed 2,200 VFX artists at the peak of production. Now, there's 1,765 visual effects shots, which is every shot in the film. So one of the obvious reasons that they ran out of time or didn't have much time is because there was so much work, probably more than they realized, right? So that's a side of how the visual effects went a little bit off the rails. But, Hugo, going back a few steps, right? In terms of decisions about how they would do the characters, I think it's important to differentiate between something like Avatar and elsewhere. Again, they were trying to retain the eyes and mouth and facial performance of an actor because, and I've heard this from studio executives sometimes, they're paying them a lot of money. They want to see the actor. Anytime you have a film where the character's in like a helmet or a mask, you always hear about the studio executive saying, "Take the helmet off, I want to see Brad Pitt," or whatever it is, right?
Well, we just saw that on Halo, like the TV show, which on the game, he never takes the helmet off. And on the show, he's always without his helmet.
Exactly.
And we saw that on Judge Dredd as well, and that happens, it happens often.
But I think that desire to retain some sort of look of Idris Elba, or others, it meant that the visual effects artists were constrained by a real performance, but then a design of a cat that didn't always work for a particular shot, where it probably might have been easier to just do a CG takeover, So that's one problem. The other problem is if you did do it all CG, you would have shot this differently. You probably would have shot it with an HMC,
Avatar you would have
style.
done it a bit like Avatar,
And then again, you also you you can move away from the look of the actor.
Yeah.
But if you try and do 100% real, photoreal CG actor, well, there's not... It's hard to do.
Yeah.
Hard to do, right?
Well, I mean, it's easy for us to talk now because the film has been out and all the decisions have been made already. But I kind of personally feel that either the Avatar route would have been the perfect choice for this, because they could have retained the main facial characteristics of the actor. Because if you look at Avatar, you see Sigourney Weaver, you can still see Sigourney Weaver on the Avatar.
Yes.
You still see her essence. And there is technology enough for him to capture the dancers anyway. And it would have really worked really well. I feel that it would have either been Avatar's way of doing it, or it should have been just hand-drawn 2D, like Ghibli style kind of painting.
I want that.
Yes, and which
Please
is what
go and make that Universal still. Or...
Which is what the concept art looks like. The concept art looks like these beautiful pastel paintings. Yeah. And I'm like, come on, guys, it's there. Just do that. And I know that you would have lost the ballet dancers, and you'd have lost the characters, you'd have lost some of the acting. But how many times have we seen animations with voice acting? You know, like the voices drive the acting.
Yeah.
And, you know, you look at Super Mario, you don't see the actors there, but you hear them. So it's like... I do think that this was... I keep saying this was I think this was incredibly misguided. And I am absolutely shocked how this went through until the end with no one questioning this, you know, because surely it's so weird. You're watching the documentary, which is recorded at the time when they're filming. Yeah. So they haven't even seen the CG. They only saw tests. And you're hearing Idris Elba, and you're hearing like Lady Judi Dench, and you're hearing all of them just saying, oh my God, this is beautiful, this is really different, and it's going to look beautiful, and it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. They haven't seen it yet. They've seen the tests, you know, they've probably seen some concept art, they've probably seen some, because, you know, they were working on VFX until like 48 hours before the film premiered anyway. So none of these actors... Afterwards, yes, we'll get to that. But I have a feeling that at no point, no one stopped Hooper on this. And I don't really understand how. How is it possible for the whole studio not to notice when they got the first renders, this might not be a good idea? Well, how is that possible?
Well, they pay for it. That's why.
Well, but you get the first render, you can check. Man, on the same year, Sonic also, everyone complained, and they changed the character, and then it made $1 billion. So it was a hugely successful film. Yeah. Funnily enough, the same VFX studio that was also doing Sonic. These people suffered, man. They did Sonic, and then they did Cats, and then they were fired. Jesus, this was not good. Yeah, like this was not a good thing.
just on the why didn't anyone notice? I get that point, but gosh, Hugo, there's some bad films get released. Are we going to say that every time? The other thing is, and this is actually an issue I've discussed with visual effects supervisors over the years, right? So they film a film, plates, live action photography, principal photography. In the case of Cats, they had all the main performers, Rebel Wilson, Idris, Judi Dench, Sir Ian McKellen, in the either leotards, green screen, gimpy shirts, gear, or with the XN's woven sensors underneath their bodysuits, which means what they filmed on set was the final film, right? There's definitely digital environments here. There's lots shot on blue screen. They had the world's best edits, right, of what they could do. Other times when we do fully CG characters or crazy environments, you really have to get some post-viz done quickly, and it's often hard to communicate to the film executive studio what the film is going to look like. I actually think many people would have watched the film with this edit of just what they had, and it would have looked quite dynamic and good. Yeah. Now, clearly they were iterating on renders and things like that, and I bet people were going, but here's what I reckon they were doing. I bet they were going, it's not finished yet. It's gonna look good when it's finished. Because that's actually what some visual effects supervisors have told me, that sometimes it's hard to communicate how good a shot will be until it's tweaked
finally
and finalized.
finished. Yeah.
And only, it's hard for test audiences and film executives to look at grayscale rendered play blasts and get the right emotion. In a different version of that, in my opinion, possibly happened with Cats. In terms of we weren't sure what we had until we didn't have it.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. And because, to be honest, like, I'm watching the behind the scenes just with the leotards, it's great because the dancers are so good. So imagine if they had the suits from the musical, would have been perfect. Like, if they just used those suits.
It
would have worked.
I bet
would have worked.
The discussion at the end of all this is, gosh, we should have just gone with
the normal suits,
prosthetics.
But which in fact, like, they didn't even got involved with the team that did the musical. So the musicals team was not even involved. The choreographers weren't involved. That entire stage set was not even connected with this film. Only Lloyd Webber was connected, and of course, because it's his music, and so was heavily involved because he even did one extra song for the film with Taylor Swift, which is probably one of the best parts of the films, by the way. I really think Taylor Swift did an amazing performance on the film. That section is quite cool.
Yeah.
And the music is really good as well, and her performance is really powerful.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like, shit, man, they should have had more of her on the film.
Well, that's very interesting you bring that up.
Yeah.
Because one of my experiences before watching the film and then watching it was that I probably thought, incorrectly, that Taylor Swift was the main character.
Because of that image.
And I think the trailers, if you didn't know much about Cats, they were trying to suggest that she was in it a lot. Now, the main character, Victoria, is brilliant. She's a great singer and she's like a professional dancer.
She's a ballerina,
And she's amazing, so not taking away from her at all. But actually, if you went to this film as a Taylor Swiftie lover, she's not in it that much.
No, she's only 10 minutes.
And she's very good in it.
Yeah.
But it was a bit of deceptive advertising, I think.
Yeah, it was.
Before the film came out.
And also, to be honest, like, the interesting thing about this is that the studio was expecting Taylor Swift to promote more the film.
Right.
Because, you probably know, like, she's really, like, she's so famous that anything she suggests or says or anything becomes viral. Like, even just going to the Super Bowl, she was just on the audience and it became viral. Yeah. It became the biggest Super Bowl's audience ever. And unfortunately, I am assuming that she didn't like the final film. We don't have any quotes. There's nothing said about that, but I'm assuming she didn't really like the final result. She didn't promote it, and she didn't really talk much about the film, and she didn't really push the film to a way that I think Universal was probably thinking. I bet they were pretty sad they didn't have that in the writing, that she had to promote it. But so the film kind of like came out, and it got slammed by the critics, and then it kept getting slammed by the own actors on the film. And that didn't help. Yeah. Didn't help at all.
Yes, and we'll talk about how it got teased at the Oscars and teased in other award shows. Yeah. But almost really, it had a bit of a toxicity attached to it right from early images or trailers. And then, Hugo, we've talked about this so much on the VFX Notes podcast, but it did quickly become a film where the CGI got slammed. Yeah. Almost originally jokingly, because some of the actors were doing on-camera interviews or mentioning on, say, like the Graham Norton show, I think it was, somewhere, something about digital fur technology. And it was just like as if that was something we were going to be really surprised at. When, of course, it was a really complex amount of simulation and animation and all that sort of thing. But it wasn't something brand new that hadn't been done before. We'll talk about something that Technicolor had invented called FaceLab, which maybe is what they were referring to, but it was definitely a studio term, digital fur technology. And I think in the industry it became a bit of a joke about this digital fur technology. Because, actually, one of the things that possibly doesn't work in the film is the fur. it occasionally, like a close-up shot of one of the cats is beautiful. A bit further away, there's a sheen on some of the cats, especially Idris Elba's character, which the sheen, it just looks a bit unfinished, I think.
Yeah.
But it's deliberate. It's a sheen that Tom Hooper, or the filmmakers,
cats
wanted.
have that.
And cats have a sheen.
Some cats have.
Absolutely.
And so I know where they go. I know where they're going, but it just doesn't work. And they went through a lot of lengths. Like if you look at the behind the scenes on the VFX supervision side, they had like 20 something people on set taking reference photography, taking witness cameras, a bunch of HDR spheres, and even had fur spheres, which was really cool. And so they had all the references they can get. But if you look at those fur spheres, they look pretty much like just brown tissue or brown, like if you look really far away, because if you start putting the sheen, you start getting moe effect, and you start getting sheen effect. You start getting really uncanny valley reflections. In the case of Idris Elba as well, it doesn't really work also because he's really muscular. So you have all these muscles, so it looks like he's naked, and he's like muscly, and then he has the sheen, and it just looks horrendous. And then he's like dancing with Taylor Swift, and Taylor Swift has like a more tiger pattern, so you don't really get that much sheen. So it just looks off when they're both of them together. And again, it's the decision, the direction of this film is absolutely wrong. This entire thing is just doesn't work. I keep saying this, but I feel like that's not the only reason that it didn't work. I think there's also, we gotta go into detail of how bad the VFX production was in terms of the environment that was going on inside these companies. But I just before we jump into that, I just wanted to really quickly talk about the dancing, and because you've mentioned Taylor Swift, and I just wanted to like mention that it was really sad for me to watch the behind the scenes. It was really incredibly sad because the dancers, especially the ballerinas and the professional dancers that were on this film, they were so happy to be in this film. And they were really putting their hearts on. They were training for months and months on this, and they did some beautiful performance. These are like professional ballet dancers, like classical ballet. They have never done a film. Some of them have never been on a film. And they were so excited. And you look at the behind the scenes, they're so happy and so moved by this, by being selected to be in the film, especially the main actress. She's so happy for being selected. And then it becomes so sad for me to think about what happened and how the film was slammed. It must have been horrible for them to see what happened, after all the amazing work that they put into this film.
I suppose for any actor, if they're getting 5% on Rotten Tomatoes or 9% or whatever it is, and then social media commentary.
I know.
We've heard a bit about that recently, actually. People in the movie Shang-Chi and others have brought that up. Not Shang-Chi, The Eternals.
Oh, The Eternals,
yeah. But that main actor, Francesca Hayward, as Victoria, she's got a beautiful voice and an incredible ballet dancer. I'm sad that maybe she hasn't had a film career out of this film.
There's a video only about her on the documentary, on the Blu-ray, and about her and about her partner. I can't remember his name. The other ballet dancer. Apologies for me not knowing your name, but it's not on the main credits. And of course a lot of her colleagues from ballet as well. It's just really, you really see how happy she was that she was selected and how much she believed this vision was going to work. She really believed it. She says multiple times on the interviews, oh my God, they're doing this technology and we're going to look like real cats and it's going to look beautiful and it's amazing what technology does these days. And Idris Elba says the same thing as well. Oh my God, it's so cool what technology can do. And it's really, really sad how things turned out to be, because I feel like this film was not only misguided, as we said, it was also like the design choices were really poor, and the merging of human and cats were really a bad decision as well, and it became really scary in some moments. But I don't think it's just the design decisions that made that problem. I also think it has to do with the way Tom Hopper worked with the VFX companies, because he is not used to VFX. He is notoriously known for being a very difficult person. Like he's famously known by that. For me, as I've worked in London for a long time in VFX, he's famous for that, for being a really hard character to work with, being a really difficult person. There are reports of him really insulting people, and there's reports of him not understanding the process and actually demanding only talking to supervisors, not talking with artists. There's reports of him sending private emails to artists complaining directly and insulting the artists. There's even reports of him demanding that all shots are fully finished before he even does feedback. Right. And so this didn't help, because this means the companies were put on an unbelievable amount of stress. They were working like 80, 70 hours a week, weekends, weekdays, every day to try to deliver this in 6 months, because they only really had 6 months after the trailer came out. And then they would get all this bad feedback because he didn't understood. If he was watching something in grayscale, he wouldn't understand it. It had to be fully finished before he could get feedback. And this is really where things go wrong, because if you start having this kind of loop where everything has to be finished before any feedback comes in, not only it takes forever, because then you limit the amount of loops of feedback you can get because you ran out of time. And that's what happened with a lot of shots. They ran out of time. But also the artists start hating what they're doing. And the artists, I am absolutely certain if you have a good crew behind you, you can get a lot more done and things get with much better quality. I'm not saying people dropped the ball. People probably were too exhausted, too tired, too broken up, and too stressed by this to even get their best work out there. And that really makes it, from a mental health point of view, it's really damaging. If you're getting onto this kind of stress level, you're not going to perform in your best. You're not going to do your best work. Things are going to be left behind. Things are going to be unfinished. This happened on this project. And so I don't think it's just the design. It's also the way it was made. It was not a healthy production by no means,
Yeah.
And I'm being too nice. Like, I'm being super nice, because I think, like, if you really read online certain things, like it is a rabbit hole.
Yeah, and I guess it's also related not just to the communication between filmmaker and visual effects studio, but it's the actual process / result, right?
Yeah.
Let's get into the uncanny valley side of it. So that, to me, that comes into, he's seeing dailies. Yeah. And it looks a bit weird, and he's like, fix it, and they're like, well, that's the shot. That's what you shot. That's how we do it. But there is an uncanny valley side to this, right? Like you're attempting to retain bits of the actors. Literally, it's almost eyes, nose, and mouth, right? Yeah. And you're needing to input that, keep that, while having a CG character around it. How hard is that to do, Hugo, compositing wise?
Yeah.
Keeping a bit of live action, and remember on set, they're kind of wearing brighter than normal makeup to hopefully find the detail in their eyes and nose and mouth.
And they have the dots as well.
They have dots, but I'm talking more about like actually compositing the live action into the CG. Man, there's some great blending that's been done. Amazing. And then, this is what we were talking about right at the front. If you stop on a frame, or even if you watch a character wipe over like that, it just looks like sometimes the face is stuck on.
Yeah. That happened. That Jennifer Hudson's character is one of the biggest offenders, I think, and also Lady Judi Dench as well. I think it's also an offender, because I think it just didn't work. The merging of that face into the cat's environment and the cat's hair and the cat's ear, I just and it floats ever so slightly sometimes. The thing with the film is that I'll get into the detail of what you've asked me, but I think it's very uneven. you do
there's
get
some great stuff
yeah,
and not so great
there's
stuff.
some amazing, and again,
Yeah.
I think it goes back to the stress on the studios. I feel like the VFX team could not deliver everything on time because there was not enough time. They spent 4 months on the trailer, which is 2 minutes, and then they spent 6 months on a 1 hour and a half rest that was left to be done, and so it's not enough time. And approaching this like a commercial, which is what ended up being, that's what happens when you approach this pipeline as if you were doing a commercial. Then you'll get some shots amazing and some shots not, because it will depend. Because if you're not running a full pipeline and you're just winging it, then some artists, you'll probably see some skill on some artists and less skill on other artists. And of course, some shots will look beautiful and other shots will not look beautiful because it's all a bit disconnected and because the pipeline is a bit all over the place. Now, you asked me how difficult this is. Man, this is probably... I'm really sad that it looks ugly, because if it looked beautiful, this would have won the Oscar, because the technology and the amount of work and the way that they're doing it is really... I don't even think I've ever seen anything like this. The
only thing to compare it to in recent times is Welcome to Marwen.
Yeah.
Which was done by Atomic Fiction, and has some dolls or figurines where Steve Carell's character and others, and they retained, again, just portions, and it has that uncanny valley look.
Yeah.
So you're right. So if they'd done it and we were like, how did you even do it? Yes, it would have won the VFX
I think
Oscar.
it would, because if you try to ignore the ugliness of for a moment, this is really tricky. You're filming these people with leotards. The leotards are much thicker because they have all the cabling. They have microphone, because we didn't mention they recorded live the performances.
Yes.
So they were singing live just like they did on Les Mis.
Yeah.
Which is not... It's not common in film. It's common in live like on live shows, Broadway shows, of course, but not common in film that you actually are recording live mics. And so they had the cabling of the suit, they had the cabling of the mics, they had battery packs, so they would have these big bulges on the legs and bulges on the shoulders, and all this is affecting the actual shape of the body. So that means that not only they have to paint out, because when they put the CG is thinner, and so they have to not only recover what's behind, and a lot of it is handheld, multiple cameras shooting at the same time. So now you're getting into a place where you need to paint over everything that is being like when you put the CG on the top, the layers of CG, you have to now remove all the extra bits of the clothing that are still behind the CG. That's step number one, which is really difficult. That's a cleanup session where you need to clean up everything and then invent the plate from behind, going the frame before, the frame after, trying to paint what's behind them. Stage number one. Then, after that, you need to then, of course, rotoscope the faces and the hands, because they kept most of the hands. Most of them, not all of them.
Sometimes too much of Judi Dench's hand.
I know. That's the version that is... Well, the trailer, you see that on the trailer. So you're keeping most of the hands, you're keeping most of the feet, you're keeping most of the face, and so you're masking that in CG. And then the tricky bit starts in terms of compositing and also CG, because the tracking needs to be perfect, because it needs to attach the face and the hands. And of course, the tracking is never perfect. You can never do perfect tracking. I'm just going to say to everyone, that doesn't exist. Okay? Perfect tracking does not exist. Suits don't work. Mocap doesn't work. None of this fucking thing works. Nothing works. And so you get an approximation of the track. That's what you get. And that means it's a bit few pixels off, it's a bit few frames off and on, and sometimes a bit up, sometimes a bit down, sometimes a bit to the side. And so after you have the CG, comes to the compositing table, which is the best they could get. The CG artists did their best, but they couldn't fix everything. Then you need to warp the footage and the CG to blend together. So that means imagine if the seam of the CG is in the side of the face here. You need to basically warp by hand pieces of the face and then warp pieces of the CG, and then make a perfect blend of rotoscoping and diffusion, and also like of wrapping between the two connections. And when the CG is a bit off of a couple of pixels, then the face is off, and then they need to move the face and then warp the face again. And sometimes on the film we see that. Sometimes we see it's a bit off.
Yeah.
Because they probably couldn't finish it in time. That's one of the issues.
That's a really great breakdown of the process. And
I didn't work on the film, but I worked on similar things.
Yeah, shows you how tricky it was for Milfilm, Mr. X, MPC, Technicolor artists to do that. They did have, Hugo, a tool that was sort of worked on during production called FaceLab.
Yeah.
And the concept of the tool was, okay, we've got often 3 characters in frame, sometimes 20, sometimes 100. We need a bit of an automated approach to generating some animation of the face, at least, of the cats. But without, as I said, no helmet-mounted camera or face-mounted camera or, separate scan. They did certainly scan the actors and use fax, approaches to do it. But their tool was called FaceLab, and it was kind of look, I don't know all the technical details. They did produce a paper at DigiPro. It's one of the only things out there about the film.
Yeah.
But it effectively could take the filmed footage and a scan of the actor and marry it up with a few machine learning tools and, other machine vision type tools and automate the animation from the film footage to basically bring it in as curves, I think, in Maya. So you've got a face plate,
to put
CG face plate, because yes, they're keeping eyes, mouth, and other bits, but it's not. It's like other parts of your face move.
Yeah.
So they wanted a bit of an automated approach to it. It seemed to work well. There are other tools like that around, especially at the moment when what people want to use a single camera to generate a CG avatar of someone without tracking markers.
Yeah.
So those things have sort of come to the fore a little bit during and since Cats.
Yeah.
I don't know where FaceLab is up to in the Technicolor stable, but it was a kind of a cool tool to see how it worked. I just think it was being built concurrently with the film.
Yeah.
And we all know how tricky
and
that
it
is.
most likely it worked on some shots and it didn't work on others. And I think that's where the manual labor process went in. And also we'd all know it's like AI tools, like our machine learning tools. These tools work a bit, and then you have to continue the process. You have to continue developing it. I kind of feel like it's really strange. This is 2018, so I kind of feel like maybe it would have worked better. Maybe now they could have pulled it off a bit better, but they definitely needed more time. That's one thing. I think that this film needed 3 years or 2 years to be done, not just 6 months. It needed years of CG and compositing. But also, I also feel that I keep saying that I think the design choice is just not correct. I feel like that's where the problem lies. And a lot of people joke around about, oh my God, look at how ugly CGI is. And this became a staple. This film almost became a staple of complaining about CGI. And of course, because of also the way it was joked on the Oscars for it, which was really in poor taste, to be honest. It was incredibly poor taste of them saying that. Going in and saying, here are the nominees, and we all know the importance of good CGI. And when we all know that the CGI was not the problem on the film.
There's another side of this which came out when I went to the Bake Off at the Oscars. So this film came out in 2019 and then was at the Bake Off in 2020.
Just before the pandemic, Jesus.
Yeah.
So you can't blame the pandemic for the film.
but at the Bake Off, a couple of curious things were said.
Yeah.
One was every frame that they shot matched the performance to the CG. Now, that's great because you are retaining the actor performances, but it also meant VFX artists weren't and didn't have any flexibility when maybe they wanted to change a performance to make it look you know, because this is what happens during this film when someone watches it, like you, Hugo, they're distracted.
Yeah.
They're distracted by the uncanny valley side of it, right?
Yeah.
And so when that does happen in other films, there are often times when the visual effects artists are able to go in and tweak a performance, right? In fact, they're often asked to by a director.
Yeah.
I think in this case, it was like, no, like you must be, there must be the frame of reference with the mocap, right, Moven suit on,
It has to look
and
exactly.
the final. Now,
Yeah.
I like that a lot,
Yeah.
but I also think it was way too restrictive.
Well, the problem with that, yes, normally that would be like an Avatar. They did that, yes, fine, and normally it would have been fine. The problem here is that
Well, no, I don't think they do it on Avatar.
Well,
they,
but
they film Sam and the other actors, and if they want to change the performance, they do. They do.
I'll be honest with one thing though. Like watching the behind the scenes, the few that exist on the Blu-ray, there are changed performances. And if you look at the before and afters, when you look at the wipe, there are not the front ones, the back cats. There's quite a lot of changes.
Okay.
Sometimes they are changed. If you really look closely, it's quite quick. But if you look closely, the foreground ones that didn't, those are correct. What I was meaning to say is that I think if you're doing CG humanoid to humanoid, that works. So if you're capturing these humans and then you're making them as a cyborg, or you're making them as a zombie, or you're making them as anything that is bipedal humanoid, then it works fine. Problem with this is that it's cats. And so we all know how cats look. And I think dancers and ballerinas and the way that they were dancing, either it has to be camp, like the musical, and then it works, because they're doing awkward things, but they're dressed up. It's like they're like in costumes. They're costumes.
Yeah.
They're in costume.
Yeah.
But this was trying to be realistic, photorealistic, but then it's walking cats. They're walking around like people. And it's like, if you look back at, for example, the drawings of Beatrice Potter. Beatrice Potter has cats in suits and they're walking, rabbits, and they all dressed up and they're walking as well, even frogs. They're beautiful drawings, but they're drawings. And so they look pretty. They look beautiful.
Yeah.
This is trying to be full CG, photoreal, but my brain is distracted because I'm looking at this and it's like people walking, but they look like cats, but they are people.
Well,
it's just weird.
It's absolutely what many people couldn't get over watching the film, which is they're just humans, they're not cats, and they don't look right. Yeah. But of course, when you watch the musical, you don't care about that stuff.
It's camp.
And you don't
it's
even
just
care.
Like, no, because they look ridiculous. They look like 90s, because it looks like, it's like, the Rocky Horror Show. It looks like that. It's like, it was funny. I don't remember who told me this or if I read it somewhere. Someone was suggesting that the only way this was going to work, or maybe it was Anna, I can't remember. The only way that this was going to work was if it was grotesque. So imagine if David Lynch or David Cronenberg would have done this film, and they would have been a grotesque cats, almost like a very dark horror movie, then it would have worked.
Well, it's funny you say that, because go and look at the makeup for the musical stage version. Yeah. They're not grotesque, but it's makeup.
Yeah, but they have noses of cats and they have whiskers.
No. But what I mean is, if Idris Elba was in the musical Cats, you probably wouldn't know it's Idris Elba.
Yes, I know.
It's covered in a mask and makeup.
I know what you mean.
In the movie, I definitely feel, like we've just talked about before, they really tried to retain too much of the actor. Yeah, and it created that uncanny valley look.
Yeah. But I know it's the poster style of talking about bad CGI, and I understand that, and I which is funnily enough, it's not featured on Jonas' videos. I need to talk to him about that, about the no CGI.
The new episode.
It's not on that one, but I feel like it should have been, but I need to talk with him about that. But the thing with this is like, it's really sad that it became the poster, but like you said, on the Oscars, it was really joked. It was really unfairly joked about being bad CGI. But I still to this day, especially when you hear the audio commentary, like Tom Hopper because the audio commentaries usually are recorded much earlier than the film coming out, so that audio commentary would have been recorded weeks before the film was out.
Right.
Most likely, sometimes it's even the week before or 2 weeks before. So the film was not out yet. He doesn't know anything about it. Throughout the whole commentary, and by the way, I don't recommend people listening to the commentary. It's one of the most boring commentaries I've ever heard in my life. He is just boring, slow, and he's so serious. Oh my God. He's taking this so seriously. He's like talking about poems and talking about allegories and Egyptian culture. And it's like the whole thing should be camp. And it's not. He's taking it so seriously.
Right.
It is unbelievably dry, that commentary. But he is absolutely convinced that this is the best version of Cats ever. And it's a little bit sad because he even talks about that he first saw the musical when he was 8 years old. And he dreamt of doing Cats ever since he's a kid. And now he finally managed to do his big, big dream. He says that on the commentary. And, I wish I could go back in time and tell my 8-year-old that I was going to do Cats one day. And it's just like, it is so... Yeah.
Well, if the film had been a success, obviously, that he wouldn't sound so silly saying that sort of stuff.
I know. It's not that it sounds silly. It's just that I feel like there is no awareness. I feel like Hopper really, really thought that this was amazing. It was the perfect film. And to his credit, multiple times on the commentary, he acknowledges the visual effects teams. He thanks the visual effects teams, and always says at least 4 times during the commentary that they did an amazing job, that they did the best they could. Like, he really compliments them the whole time, which is weird because of all the reports we have that he treated the VFX artists really badly. But I guess once it's finished, it's different, I guess. But he actually compliments them quite a lot, and which is good for him to do that. But I guess it's a bit too late now.
Yeah. It was an interesting experience being at the Bake Off because...
So you were there?
Yes.
Oh, man.
So I was at the Bake Off in Los Angeles. Now, this is the year that 1917 won the visual effects Oscar. The other big films were things like Lion King, right? Yeah. And then Cats is in the 10. Now, the curious thing was that they did not show a breakdown reel. Every other
even
film...
the ones on the Blu-rays were not shown?
No. Now...
Why they're on the Blu-rays? That's weird.
There was a bit of speculation amongst the other attendees that it was because Universal, again, thought the film was quite toxic.
Yeah.
And we just don't want to elevate any discussion about the CGI. So they sort of refused to allow one to be shown.
I'm so shocked that they allowed it on the Blu-ray then.
Yeah,
I'm so shocked.
You know, the Blu-ray, they're trying to sell Blu-rays. They want lots of behind-the-scenes material. Maybe that's one reason.
Yeah.
The other thing is, so I even asked the visual effects supervisor, Phil Brennan, who presented at the Bake Off, why there was no breakdown reel. He said everyone was exhausted, right? So the film came out on like the 19th of December. People would have braked for Christmas.
Yeah.
And the Bake Off is like literally the 3rd of January or something like that. He said no one's had time to put one together.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know the truth of that, but it sounds pretty plausible in terms of the time.
Yeah.
But we also know that things like Blu-rays and audio commentaries, they do get made as the film is getting made.
Yeah.
So this footage existed. Whether or not those particular wipey breakdowns existed.
Well, that's the thing. Actually, you have a point there because it's not a breakdown. It's just a wipe. So it's different. Because the wipe is easy.
You just have the CG.
Because the editor can do that. They can just have the raw plate and then the CG plate and just wipe. And that's why I saw on the Blu-ray. There is no real breakdown. That's a different thing. Like step by step, there's no breakdown. You just have those wipes.
So it was interesting watching.
But you didn't even saw the wipes on the Bake Off.
No.
That was
so here's what usually gets played at the Bake Off: a 10-minute reel of final shots. then a 5 to 10 minute breakdown reel, then a bit of a Q&A with the supervisor. And so we saw a 10-minute reel and we had a Q&A, on stage, but no breakdown reel. Whereas the 9 other films, 1917, Lion King, showed incredible breakdowns, right?
That's why I didn't
so it was a bit like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
And then sort of fed the continuing saga about, let's not talk about the CGI of cats.
Yeah.
So that was curious.
Yeah, and there was also things going behind the scenes as well, because at the time, I remember people from the Oscars saying that, when the Bake Off comes out, then there's usually a page for your consideration where people from the Oscars go and see the material and then they vote. And there was I don't have a screen grab of it, but there is people seeing this page. There was actually a full page of for your consideration, even saying for your consideration for best director, best editing, best picture, best VFX, best sound, best music. Yeah. It was like the total list of the 12 or 13 Oscar nominees that they wanted. And then suddenly, out of the blue, it was removed from the internet. So even before the voting was ending, even before the voting was cast, that page disappeared.
Right.
So I have a feeling that Universal just wanted to cut their losses. And at that stage, the film was not getting... Like, the film lost money, quite a lot of money. They didn't even recoup the costs. And so I think they just wanted to get the hell out of there. They're just not... Let's not ever talk about this ever again.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of sad because I'm happy to say I really enjoyed it. And I think it had the potential, as some musical films do, is to have a music video of the Taylor song with her singing, or Francesca's version of Taylor's song that's in the film. I think it's called Beautiful something. Anyway, it had the potential to, especially in the age of social media, none of that came out, at the time. And by the way, just in terms of that, for your consideration stuff and the Bake Off, the other reason I think that they weren't pushing awards and weren't pushing visual effects awards in particular was because there was this bit of almost controversy about unfinished visual effects shots, which of course are not unfinished, they're just run out of time, So actually the film was released, as I say, on something like the 19th of December, and then a couple of days later Universal sent out a new DCP package with what they called were updated visual effects shots. It's not unfinished, but it's maybe that Judi Dench ring finger hand one.
The hands,
and then just anything else that they were.
Well, there was a couple of there's some videos online about that. There's some faces that were tweaked, and which is really funny. It's almost like a video game. They made a one-day a deal, like a day one patch to patch the game.
Now I'm
to patch the film.
I'm convinced this happens more often than people.
It does.
realize.
It just doesn't go to the press. That's probably. I'm sure it happens behind the scenes and no one even knows about it.
Maybe for sound issues.
Well, we've talked about that on Stranger Things, where I watched the whole season. The hour that it came out, I watched the whole thing binged, and then the day after they tweaked shots, and so I never saw the new shots. It's because I watched it right away. Let's do one thing that I want to say, because yes, you are a fan of the film, and I just wanted I don't want to sound negative on everything. There's a couple of positive things that I want to put out to the film. I feel like, and maybe you agree or disagree with me. I feel like, yes, some shots look beautiful, some shots didn't look beautiful. But if there's one thing that looks absolutely stunning in this film is the sets. Yeah. Jesus, they did When I was watching the first time, I swear to God, I thought it was CG. I really thought that they, because why not? They're putting the cats in CG. Why not do the such? And there is some in CG.
Clearly, there are extensions.
Yeah, there's the Trafalgar Square. That's full CG. That's a green screen. And also the
railroad tracks.
Yes, that's full CG as well. And also the London Piccadilly Circus, that's full CG.
Yeah.
Except the Trafalgar Square, they made the lions and everything, but the rest, the backyards, the milk bar, the theater, also the street, that's a real set. And it's even the rooms, the kitchen, and it's a set scaled up to 2.5 times, so it's scaled like cats. and they are just beautiful.
They are.
I was just shocked when I was watching the Blu-ray. I was like, oh my God, this is even worse than I thought. What a lost opportunity, because because you see, they cannot buy this stuff. They had to do everything by hand, because you can't source anything 2.5 size.
Yeah.
So if you have to have a cup or a bottle, you have to make it, because you can't buy a bottle that is 2.5 size.
Yeah.
The craftsmanship on the sets is just outstanding.
Agree. Again, people will be watching the B-roll and behind the scenes as they're watching us, and it does look fantastic. However, that's actually something I don't think worked at all.
Yeah,
in the
to
film.
mix the two things.
The scale
Yeah.
differences when they're inside
Yeah.
versus outside, especially London outside in Piccadilly and the railway tracks, and it's a bit distracting.
It's very off, yeah.
And
It's because the humans, that's the problem. Because
Yeah.
cats would be with the 4 legs,
Yeah.
and they would be larger, so it's
yeah.
just different.
But I'm not sure I even watched this film thinking that they're meant to be cats. You know, like
No, but the scale, like, they would
Yeah.
look different because they would be longer.
Yeah.
And also, like, if they're smaller, I also think they lost the mark with the scale. They should have shot with different types of lenses, a little bit more macro lenses, so that it would look a bit less bigger.
Yeah.
So it would look a bit more like a miniature. It
Yeah.
needed to look smaller.
there had been some really great work done in some other films, like Night at the Museum.
Yeah.
Not Nightmare.
Yeah.
Night at the Museum, with this kind of different scales for those characters that are tiny, right?
Yeah.
And to me, in visual effects, they were very successful.
Yeah.
They didn't do it on cats.
No, because
And
they didn't do motion. Yeah, that's usually done with motion control, because then you can film different plates
Yeah.
with different lenses and calculate, and then the scale is right. And also, like, a good example of that is that film with Matt Damon called where they are really tiny. Downsizing.
Yeah.
Where the scale also really worked. And again, it's the same kind of deal. You have, like, macro photography, different lenses, and a different approach to shotting and blocking. And I feel that because this was shot like a documentary, like Les Mis, it was shot loose with handheld, with the camera operators in the middle of the action to shoot the dancers. That's what it makes it off in terms of scaling. Because in reality, it should have been more like a stage show. The camera could have been a bit more higher up and a bit more far away, and then you would have seen it a bit more like with the correct scale. I think it's almost like you imagine this like tiny cameras walking around, which really doesn't work.
So the scale differences didn't work for me. What did work is that it does fit into the bonkers side of the film, right?
Yeah.
Like suddenly they're walking on railway tracks, or there's a procession of cockroaches or bugs or whatever it is.
Inside the table.
And they're bouncing on the bed, and you know, like, it kind of works. I imagine this film possibly would work if you're really drunk or really high or something like that.
yeah.
And in fact, there's a psychedelic side to the stage musical.
Multiple people talking about that
Yeah.
on podcasts that I've heard.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of podcasts about this film because of the research.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people saying that when they're high or when they're drunk, this works really well.
Yes, and it's hallucinatory in its nature because it's about cats, the singing, you know, and balloon sequences sort of fits into that even, you know.
But you know what would have really worked is that if they were just using, again, we talked about this, if they just were using the suits from the musical with that oversized scale set, it would have worked really well. It would have looked really strange, but really camp and weird, and it would have and then you would have gotten those amazing performances anyway. Because they could have had the suits, but just maybe not the face. Maybe they could have not put the face in. I think if it was a bit more conceptual, and if it would have been a bit more artistic, and maybe they didn't have to have the suits so attached to their faces. Maybe their faces could have been out there. I think it would have worked better. But in terms of scale, there's another thing that doesn't work on scale as well, which is the bodies themselves. Cats usually have a big head. And I feel like the heads were really tiny to the body because they were just normal humans. And, you know, ballet people, they're really thin and they're really they're very tall usually, and they open much their arms and their legs, and it just doesn't really work for looking at a cat. I think the head could have been bigger. The body should have been a bit shorter.
Well,
it could have worked differently.
My take on that is that some characters were actually perfect.
Yeah.
Victoria, Francesca's character, like that. She just is the slight build that fit perfectly. Taylor was perfect as a cat.
Yeah.
As you mentioned before, Idris, it just often didn't look right because of the muscles.
Yeah.
The bigger cats, James Corden and Rebel Wilson, actually worked.
Yeah, because they were like fatter and looked like more like cats.
Yeah.
They because their bodies were bigger.
And it's comedy, right? Like,
Yeah.
Yes, so that didn't work. What didn't work when the characters were too big or didn't have the scale thing right was that it kind of reminded me of that video clip for that music, for that song. Is it called Where's Your Head At?
Oh, yeah.
Do you know that? Where, I mean, I think
I know.
CFC or Framestore or someone, maybe it was The Mill, did it years ago. And it was very deliberately meant to be the band members pasted onto monkeys or something.
Yeah.
What is the name of that band? Sorry, everyone. But
Basement Jazz, right?
Basement Jazz.
Basement Jazz, yeah. I think it's Basement Jazz.
Basement, whatever.
I'm sure people will complain on the audio.
Sorry, we're music experts here. But
yes, the music notes.
Occasionally, I was like, "Oh no, this is Where's Your Head At?" You know. Anyway, so
sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. Well, the film won a lot of awards. It won 6 Razzies. And I feel like it was a shame Hopper didn't really embrace that. You know, like Alberry really embraced it. She won the Oscar and the Razzie on the same year, and she went to pick it up, both of them.
And was that a film about cats as well?
Yeah, that's right. It was Catwoman. Jesus, what is going on here? You're right. But she was a big sport. She went there and did a speech and everything. If I was Tom Hopper, I would have done it. I would have went there and made a speech, a really serious speech, getting the Razzie. You know. Now, I really, I've said this before. I really hope that this doesn't destroy any careers of the up. I mean, I know that Idris Elba is fine, and I know that Ian McKellen is fine, and Judi Dench is fine. They're gonna be fine. But I am a bit afraid about the newcomers, the new dancers, and the new actors that are in this film. It is a shame that it started their careers like this. I really hope they can put themselves together because they're really talented, and I really hope to see them in many films to come. But that hasn't happened yet, and I feel like this film does have a bit of a stink to it. And in fact, the director, Tom Hopper, he hasn't done anything since. And
done some TV, but
I don't really know what's happening there. If he's because I feel like the King's Speech is a really good film. I didn't really the Danish Girl. That film was okay, but I didn't really like it as much. Really hated Les Mis, but again, it's because I hate music. I hate musicals, so I'm not gonna. And I cannot bear to see them. They sing so bad on that film, so poorly. like what's his name?
Russell
Crowe sings so. Oh my God, he's such a bad.
He's not so good, but look, the others are great. Hugh Jackman is amazing in that film.
He's a showman.
Hathaway,
that's what he wants to do.
Right.
He doesn't want to be. He doesn't want to be Wolverine. He wants to be. But funnily enough, that film also was a bit of a problem from a VFX point of view because that film. Because I was at the Mill at the time when Mill Film was doing that film, and there was a lot of reports going through our other office because it was just a sister office. And the biggest problem with that film was because Hopper was filming with a lot of cameras on set. So they had to delete and paint so many cameras. And I know now this is quaint. Everyone does that, but not really at the time. Like this was a long time ago, and it was a lot of work to kind of clean up all those cameramans and kind of recover all that stuff. But yeah.
Yeah. I will say only this. You mentioned worrying about the ballet dancers and actors. I've felt for the VFX artists. Usually as a visual effects artist, if you've worked on something for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, you want something for your reel.
Yeah.
I don't know whether they could use Cat's footage or behind the scenes footage.
They can't. And there's no breakdowns as well.
Yeah.
No breakdowns
were made. Bummer. That's a bit of a bummer for it, I think.
Yeah. There's these wipes on the Blu-ray, and that's about it. But I mean, I guess The problem though is like they have to rip the Blu-ray, and that's not even allowed, and they don't have permission, and so I'm assuming most of these people worked almost a year on this, and they have nothing to show, which is not uncommon. I mean, I have in my career, it happened to me 6 times now, something not coming out. So that happens sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes things don't come out,
Yeah.
or get canceled, or at least the film came out. At least that. Not that it's a good put on your resume thing, but
Well, I need to just say one more time, as an overall thing, watching this before Christmas, I really dug it. I got into it. I sang the songs. I can, as we've clearly talked about, I realize why people don't like it.
Yeah.
But
you're a fan of the musical, I guess. So, and you like musicals, don't you?
I do.
So,
I do.
You're Australian. Australians like musicals.
All right, we're going to wrap this up and actually join us for part 2 of this discussion where we discuss the entire butthole edit of Cats.
My God.
We're not going to talk about
We
it.
forgot about that.
No, we didn't forget about it. We're not talking about it.
I want to see that version now. Where is that version? Because cats, I've had 3 cats. I had 4 cats in my life, and cats love to show you the butthole. They love it. They keep showing it to you. Like, here it is.
Oh
you want
my
to see
God.
it? You want to see it
Here
again?
you go. I can't.
Here
we
it is.
can't end on this. By the way, the butthole thing did exist, sort of.
Yeah.
What it was that cats, when they're turned around and the cameras...
Yeah, they have a dot. Yeah.
Well, no, they didn't build that into the model. It's more like the folds of the fur and what you're expecting to see
To be there,
under
yeah.
the tail.
Yeah,
So it was a cleanup thing, right?
Yeah. There's no genitalia either on the...
No.
Idris Elba is like a eunuch on the film.
Thank God we've mentioned this right at the end. Perfect, very fitting for summing up Cats. Hugo, love the film. That's all we need to say, right?
Yes.
Everybody, thank you so much for being
Thank you
part
so
of
much,
this.
and leave some comments behind if you worked on the film, and congratulations anyway, because I think the film does look really good, and yeah, it's great to have you here, man, in person. I wish we could record all the episodes in person.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for sticking around to hear this.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Hugo.